Oh my gosh, I'm not gonna remember. It's a denim brand. It was a very
True Religion.
It was a True Religion.
They went
I
public.
Think you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're exactly
that was
right.
a big deal.
So he was watching. He saw. I think what it was like in New York, saw like a ton of his high fashion friends wearing True Religion jeans and was like, this is going to be a thing, and then did really well in True Religion. And
obviously, just to note, True Religion now is not what it once
doing well.
was. Just FYI to everyone listening.
Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGZ. It is a special recap episode this week because we are coming at you not live, but from Miami. And I am joined by the one and only Blake Finucane. Did I nail it?
Nailed it.
Oh
Nailed
God,
it.
thank
Perfect.
God. I talk about Blake all the time on this podcast. I think she's brilliant. She's been on the show before. And every time I talk about her, I mispronounce her last name and I always make a comment about it. So glad to have gotten this right. We're joined by Blake, who has spent the last year as a professional NFT investor with a fund. Remind me the name of the fund.
Pluto Digital, now Emergent Entertainment.
Love it. Pluto Digital.
New merger.
Now, alpha here on the pod.
Out here.
Here it here first. And also the soon-to-be host of Context. Give me the sub name again.
Views on Crypto and Culture.
Context, Views on Crypto and Culture. Sounds like something our audience would love.
Yeah, presenting with Boys Club. Coming soon.
We love Boys Club.
Very excited.
Yeah, so we want to make sure you go follow Blake on probably Twitter. What would be your preferred platform?
Yeah, Twitter's great.
On Twitter?
Everything will be announced soon.
Okay, so you can follow and hear the updates for when her pod launches. And with that, we got lots of good things to talk about today. We're in Miami for Basel, so we made you give the Basel updates, the highlights thus far at Basel. But we also have to talk about ape staking, the geo blocking that they're doing. This came out sort of Thanksgiving week, so I haven't really gotten to talk about it on the pod. I think we should definitely get into that. Some privacy concerns were raised about Metamask. I personally think they're overblown. We'll get into that.
Nice.
G Money is doing some cool things with 9DCC, his fashion brand, and physical backed digital assets. I really want to dive into that one. I think that's a really interesting topic and more. But before we do that, we do need to hear a word from our amazing sponsors who make this show possible.
When it comes to NFTs, convenience often wins over security, despite scams being everywhere. Brands and artists have no other choice by complying with big marketplace terms and weak security because no good alternative exists. Which is what prompted Ledger to fix the problems of NFTs themselves and launch Ledger Market. The Ledger Market provides an end-to-end secure NFT experience for brands, artists, and users, enabling true ownership and control over NFT assets, from minting to storing. Ledger Market secures NFT projects via Ledger Enterprise, keeping you protected from phishing attacks and scams. And the market directs users to Ledger Live, where they can transact with a contract directly, giving clear signing details instead of blind signing and praying. Don't trust, verify with clear signing from Ledger Market. Stay up to date on the latest drops and the marketplace updates by following Ledger on Twitter and joining the Ledger Open Discord, which is linked in the show notes below. BUENO is the NFT toolkit you need to launch your digital collectible on the blockchain without coding. Every step of the NFT creation process, from generation to mint, all taken care of by the BUENO NFT toolkit. With BUENO, you can load up your art layers, reorder the layers, tinker with rarity, everything you need to make your NFT project a reality. BUENO even allows you to mint your tokens on the blockchain with zero code and offers advanced minting logic like linking allow lists, airdropping tokens, and on-chain royalty configuration. As a part of their launchpad, you'll get access to forums to run surveys, email collection, and build your pre-sale list to make sure you are hooked into your own community. BUENO is full of powerful tools you need to build the most expressive NFT project possible. So go to bueno.art and start building your own collections today.
All right, kicking off here, Blake, I do just love to give the overall market sentiment. How are things feeling to you? We're here in Miami. How do you think the market's feeling? NFTs, crypto, all the above?
I think it's very different from last year. One of the things I've been thinking about is, how do you, there's been some big parties, obviously.
Always.
Lots of money spent on activations, on kind of experiences, and what I'm really getting the sense of is that these have been planned for a really long time. These are not
These were bull market.
Yes, bull market
bull
decisions.
Market activations.
I'm really getting the sense, and the question that's coming to me is, how do you plan long term while also being very robust and reactive to the market? Because what I'm seeing is, we're not going to name names, of course, because we love a lot of the projects and we love a lot of kind of what's happening, but there's a lot of money being spent. And some of the stuff doesn't make sense in the context in which we are in right now, I think. And I don't know if you've been feeling this. I mean, we've only really been here. Basel officially kind of kicked off yesterday.
Wednesday. Yeah, we're recording this on Thursday. We
I
got
just
here
broke
Tuesday.
the fourth wall that you can't say what day we're recording
that's great.
on. Learning for the podcast coming. But, I haven't seen a lot of attendance. There's not been a lot of packed parties.
Yeah, I agree.
What have you been feeling?
It's definitely the same.
Yeah.
It's definitely lower energy.
Yeah.
I think you're right, than the activations maybe call for.
Yeah. They call for excitement. They call for kind of optimism.
Yeah.
And even the conversations I think that I've been having, there's more tightness to people. And there's not the same amount of expansion and kind of hopefulness, I would say, which makes sense.
Folks are burned out. I think what I'm feeling is I feel as bullish as ever on the technology in many ways, but I feel burned out just broadly.
And I mean,
I think that's probably not uncommon. Like folks, what folks I'm hearing from, I think that seems to be the sentiment, is like just some fatigue and knowing
December.
that it's not probably near over.
Yeah.
So actually, this was another thing I wanted to talk about. There's something in Bloomberg about the Fed. The Fed is unwinding a bunch of their balance sheet, and there's been so much focus on rate hikes and how that impacts the market and how that is, leading to recession, or we'll call it, demand side recession, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also real headwinds for the market, around their unwinding. And I think it was actually I have it up here. The S&P may drop by as much as 15% by March, according to Morgan Stanley. So I don't know. I'm still definitely in the mindset of like, we got a long winter ahead of us.
Yeah.
I did hear a couple people yesterday being like, I think it'll be over by March. I was like, that's an optimistic take.
Yeah, and I think too, just with crypto, and I know everybody has said this, but there's different macro conditions that we're dealing with. So kind of the ups and downs that we've experienced in the last, year, 2 years, in terms of little blips of kind of fear, it fits in really differently now when you consider, again, kind of geopolitics, larger kind of economic conversations that are happening. And I think it makes it it's just harder to kind of let loose in a way that I think we've been experiencing in the last kind of 18 months with crypto.
Let's talk about ApeCoin staking.
Let's do it.
We actually, it's funny, talked about staking on the last time you were on the podcast.
Yeah.
And you made a point that I feel deeply, which is there's this sort of funny dynamic when you're talking about staking for a project coin.
Yeah.
Because staking is fundamentally about securing a network. So Ethereum has staking because you're securing the network of Ethereum, which is an integral part to it continuing to exist.
Yeah.
You don't have that with NFT projects, with ApeCoin staking. It's sort of a superfluous thing.
It's literally to dry up supply for the price to go up. That's the whole point of NFT staking in any ecosystem, really.
Which is kind of funny.
Funny is the right word,
and
maybe.
It certainly gives some credence to the Ponzi argument that folks like to make. The counter, of course, being that if ApeCoin can become sort of endemic and used across actual gaming experiences, metaverses, other side, whatever other ones that might exist, then great. Then it has utility, and then the more ApeCoin you have, the better you've done. And if you were staking it, fantastic, and you weren't just dumping it on the market. Let's get into, though, they've instituted geo-blocking on the front end of like the ApeCoin staking platform that's been built by Horizon Labs. And I think there was some confusion around this. Initially, people were feeling like, the geo-blocking applied to the United States if you're in the United States or Canada. And then the other countries were like Iran, Russia, like Saudi Arabia, Cuba. Like it was a funny mix of I guess maybe not U.S. allies per se, but of countries who were geo-blocked. You're not able to stake your ApeCoin using the Horizon Labs front end. But it's a smart contract, and if you wanted to stake, you can stake directly through the smart contract back end.
Yeah, first of all, considering all the kind of SEC issues, I'm absolutely shocked that these announcements have been coming out.
Okay, that was sort of my reaction too.
We don't need to, I've made some horrible trades around ApeCoin.
Tell us.
Just like I've sold it all, I've bought it awful times. Like, have I even made money from it? Who's to say?
Yeah.
But I cannot believe that they're actually coming out with it. I completely, as kind of an investor, I completely misread their boldness or I guess their lawyer skill at navigating all the kind of regulatory issues. I would love to kind of know and get their lawyers to walk us through the protections that are put in place for everyone to be coming out and coming after them, because I'm like, they're the biggest target, they're the biggest name, and they're kind of like walking.
They're poking the bear. That was literally the title of our newsletter this week, was like poking the bear.
Which you should sign up for because it's so informative.
Love it. Love a little cross promotion.
Yeah.
I think that's generally my reaction too, is like kind of shocking to see them.
Yeah.
And you have such a combination of factors. You have the SEC's obviously been very upfront about the fact that they're going after these coins and that they see proof of stake coins as securities. And, so they've made they haven't been shy about that. And then you have the additional context, which is Gary Gensler sort of has egg on his face post this FTX situation. He's getting a lot of heat for not having regulated that situation and for being so cozy with Sam. So almost certainly there's an element of like, he wants a big win.
Stakes are high, so to speak.
Yeah.
Excuse us.
Pun intended.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know. I mean, obviously ApeCoin has some interesting specificities. They were very careful to make sure it was ApeCoin DAO and not Yuga itself, who was the originator of this coin, who distributes the coin. But it seems like it may not matter. I don't know. Well, I really don't have a take on exactly how this is going to play out.
The other thing I think that is interesting just to note is, the volume's been up on Bored Apes. The Kennel Club, massive volume, massive floor increases, and the ApeCoin itself, volume has been huge. It's also, I think, up. I mean, again, we're filming on a Thursday. Who's to say what it'll be on Friday or next week? But it's been up on an average of 30%. Now, I'm going to guess a lot of that volume is coming from American buyers. So in terms of where I think people are going to find ways to do it. I mean, does it speak to just an uneducated market that just hears news and buys, and it doesn't actually matter how you're going to be able to engage with it if you're country specific? But people are reacting. I think the market is reacting. So I think the market will participate too in the staking. They'll find a way.
That's the other piece that felt so ballsy was ApeCoin DAO not coming out and specifically saying, explicitly say, don't do this in the U.S. They were so tacitly signing off on staking via the contract.
Yeah.
Which, as somebody who believes in kind of permissionless, decentralized, I'm like, great, I love that. I'm rooting for that. As somebody who worries about the regulatory environment, I'm like, oh boy.
Well, and I know we're going to get into it in the next segment around actually privacy and apps versus the protocol contract layer, which is so different. And this kind of speaks to that as well. That people are, at the end of the day, given a choice. And it should not necessarily matter where you are. But
before we get into the privacy piece, let's actually talk. There's a lawsuit. I'm pulling this up here.
Real time.
In real time, I'm pulling this up. Hodl. There's some what are they? An LLC, I guess. Crypto-focused firm Hodl Law.
Okay,
PLLC.
Great name. Let's stop and start there. Yeah. Okay.
Is suing the SEC, alleging they have failed to A, clarify jurisdictional authority over digital assets, and 2, define whether digital assets are securities.
Interesting.
So I think on the surface of this, again, I've become such a degen. I'm rooting for lawsuits against the SEC and things.
It happens to all of us.
It happens. Yeah. On the surface, I kind of agree with this. I'm I do think there's been a lack of clarity coming out of the SEC. Now, I think there's people who push back on that. They wrote a paper back in 2017 about digital assets, but this was before we even had the term NFT. And they wrote some paper that I think the SEC points to as we've given you some clarity, but it's completely insufficient. And so I like this. I'm it's ridiculous that you're regulating by enforcement rather than by guidance. And it's really frustrating. The kind of counter take to this is, again, poking a bear. Are you gonna push to get more clarity in like the worst possible
They're almost
moment
precedent setting, or
for the
they're looking to
regulators
do
to
that.
give clarity that is going to be really harmful for crypto because everyone's so mad about it. Like push for regulation when things are going well in crypto and people
Yeah.
are making money
Yeah.
and there's like a slightly more favorable feeling towards crypto as opposed to in a market where we just went through FTX and now they're asking for regulation at a time when the regulation may be worse. I could go either way with this. Again, I kind of appreciate that somebody is calling this out in the courts, being like, you need to actually provide clarity on whether these are securities in a really like hard and fast way. But it does make me nervous.
Yeah, and I guess the only other thing in terms of Yuga Labs' relationship to all of this is, as kind of a crypto participant, investor, like lover of all things crypto, I'm really happy it's actually Yuga doing this and pushing the envelope as opposed to kind of some of the other more maybe kamikaze companies. And they're super well run, they're super well funded. So in terms of people taking the risk, I'm really happy it's them. I think they're well capitalized and well organized when stuff does happen, that they're going to be able to handle it, and they're perhaps going to be able to push back and support some of these other smaller kind of companies engaging in different ways. So in that way, I think I feel good about it compared to what it could be.
I mean, that's a testament to Yuga leadership at this point.
Exactly.
That they because you could have a very big project where they did not feel professional. Though at this point, I think the way it's shaken out is the big projects are ones that have fairly professionalized.
Totally. They've had to be. And they'll have to be more even so, considering what's coming. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good point. I agree. I think they have done a really smart job picking partners. That's something somebody asked me, like, what do I think Yuga's done best? And I think one of the things they've done best is picking their partners. I think Improbable is an amazing partner. I think Nicole's been a great CEO, frankly, in that regard. In terms of like, I mean, sure they've got the network to get what they need.
It all. Yeah.
And so I do think that if anybody's going to be pushing the boundaries, they're probably the right project to be doing it.
Exactly.
And they have the edgy,
exactly
the edgy brand.
I was going to say, and the users themselves, they don't care.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the actual people holding apes, I'm like, they're ready to
middle finger to
they're ready
all
to
of
go
it.
right straight to the contract. They don't need an app, So
yeah. They'll go to the contract.
Yeah.
So you mentioned this privacy piece. This was another. I kind of missed this story as it was playing out. Again, it was Thanksgiving week, so everything was a little funky.
Yeah. And then Thanksgiving week into Basel, it's a whole whirlwind for these 2 weeks. Yeah.
Metamask Consensus updated their privacy policy on their website, and the initial reports were saying that they updated their privacy policy to announce they were starting to collect things like your IP address and basically collecting a bunch of data that makes people a little bit nervous. I kind of immediately was skeptical of this when I started to catch up on the story. I was like, it's not clear to me that they are starting to collect this data for the first time. I think they've updated their policy to more comprehensively explain what they had already been collecting. And it seems like that's the case. MetaMask has come out and kind of clarified some things since the original news story started to break. Joseph Lubin, who's the CEO of Consensus, also wrote a clarifying post. I mean, at the end of the day, what this comes down to is this is data collection for Infura, who I'm not technical enough to know exactly what the interplay of all this is.
Yeah.
You're probably even better placed than I am, but who's interacting with, interactions you're trying to make with the blockchain via MetaMask. Oh, terrible explanation. But.
No, I mean, I think what this really brings up, and the key question is just the relationships between apps and protocols, and we need on these like very dynamic, free, quote unquote, intense term, sorry, but open protocols. We need people building on them, and like that creates real tension between the kind of ethos of the protocol and what it stands for, and the people on top building apps when they're often businesses. You need to make money. You're domiciled in a certain country. Like the real clashes of what they stand for and kind of the typical structure of how to run a business comes to the forefront in these types of kind of examples. So I think it makes it really complicated, and you're also you're engaging with a user base who is so passionate, and I would say is probably the most educated about digital privacy of probably any consumer/user base in history, and right now in kind of who's drawn to this technology. So I think it makes it really complicated. And it's important that these conversations are being had, but I don't know if there's a solution to it.
I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I have to say, I mean, there's a couple things.
I think it's important to point out.
Sure, it's always good to be educated about what's happening with your data, of course. And, I came from the Yang presidential campaign where he wanted, basically to pay a data dividend and be like, they're using your data, you should be paid something for that. So I'm certainly on that train. I think frustrations over this, I think partly stemmed from sort of a misunderstanding of what was happening. First of all, Metamask is not monetizing this data in any way, so it's already a distinction from your Web 2 companies. The other thing is you can bypass this by using your own RPC. And Lord knows I'm not technical enough to be able to speak well on this, but that's my understanding is this only applies if you're using Metamask's default RPC, which certainly if you don't know what that means, you are using their default RPC. I certainly am. But the very fact that you can choose to bypass this data collection process if you wanted is a huge difference from the world we're in with Facebook and whatever, all these other kind of Web 2 companies that take your data in a black box, sell it, monetize it, and you're the product. So I am definitely on team defending MetaMask consensus in this. You have Cardano's foundation, IOG, I believe is the Cardano foundation, like the equivalent of the ETH Foundation, who have put out Midnight, a privacy-focused blockchain. There's a couple others like this. I know, I guess the Secret Network is more about your assets being sort of hidden from others. Anyway, so I think there's alternatives being built, and to your point, it's a trade-off between like convenience and privacy.
And I think, again, in terms of the consumer base and the user base of these products, a lot of them are skilled enough to bypass.
Yeah.
So
if you care enough about this,
giving people the option
do your own thing
is the important thing. I think, with Uniswap also kind of updating their terms and the uproar about that. Uproar, I mean, that's a relative term. Some people are kind of, rattled by it. Again, I think those are really important conversations. And the more that people reveal kind of their privacy constraints, because again, these are actual businesses that have real addresses that are paying people, no matter how decentralized the actual apps are that you're able to interact with, the people building them or how they're organized is their traditional businesses. So people are going to have constraints, and they're going to need to report to people. So again,
to give context on the Uniswap situation, my understanding of this is they disclose that under certain circumstances they will share data they've collected, and
mostly legal issues.
Yes, exactly, like tornado cash situations which I understand people's frustrations and discomfort with that. I also think, like, to your point, they're a business that need to stay in business. And if you have the federal government or some like international legal body coming after you, it's a really it's a tricky line to figure out. It's a tricky line to walk.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I think all these conversations are really interesting that they're bubbling up now in such intense times, anyways, with regulation, with the kind of push and pull between decentralized kind of applications and centralized ones. We've seen the issues that arise with that. So they're important conversations to have, and I don't think there's any solutions at this point.
All right, G Money, he's got his like luxury brand. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, and I know like he is really going after fashion. It's wearables, it's digital and physical. We're going into fashion.
And he's been on the podcast before when I kind of pressed him on this because I was like, I'm going to be honest, like
I don't get it.
Yeah, like I don't, not just I don't get fashion wearables, more like, G Money, like, are you, like, I'm kind of surprised you're super into fashion almost. And
he's always dripping in designer.
Really?
Every pic, every post. He's
into it.
Oh, he's all in. Yeah.
So, and his answer was, I'm into consumer goods. And as a trader, he was a big equities trader for years. He did very well on Apple stock because he saw everybody wearing Apple headphones in the subway early and was like, this is a thing. And then he did very well on, God, what was the brand? Oh my gosh, I'm not gonna remember. It's a denim brand. It was a very
True Religion.
It was True Religion?
They went public.
You're right.
Yeah.
Exactly
that was
right.
a big deal.
So he was watching. He saw I think what
I
it was
love
was
that
like
that was
in
just-
New York, saw like a ton of his like
Yeah.
high fashion friends wearing True Religion jeans and was like, this is going to be a thing, and then did really well in True Religion. And
Obviously, just to note, True Religion now is not what it
Not
once
doing well.
was. Just FYI to everyone listening.
I know this is the risk. It's like you can have these simplified stories of like, oh, I saw people wearing True Religion jeans, so I bought the stock. And it's
But
like,
it
that
was
does not
huge.
usually work. Like, that's not usually plays out where
Yeah.
like you make a bunch of money because
Yeah,
you like
yeah, yeah.
observed that. But that's his like simplified story of how he's done well,
Makes sense.
well in equities.
Yeah.
And so I think I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense that,
Yep.
that this sort of falls in line with that consumer side. So he's into luxury movements, fashion in particular. I know he's partnered with IYK, who I've mentioned in this podcast because I'm quite friendly with their team. I think they're awesome.
Yeah.
And they're doing NFC chips in, physical items, fashion. They're doing a lot on the music scene as well. So you can tap your sweatshirt or whatever and then pull up an NFT, a POAP, a video, an exclusive video that you only get to watch if you have, if you have that sweatshirt and tap that NFC code. So really interesting things that they're doing there. But what struck me was they're unveiling this program, it appears, in which you tie an NFT to a physical good, and then you can use that NFT to create liquidity off the back of that physical good. So the example being, okay, you have a really valuable Air Jordan collection. If you had NFTs tied to those Air Jordans, in a normal scenario, if you didn't have the NFT and you wanted liquidity off the back of that Jordan, you'd have to go to a pawn shop, sell it, buy it.
Dark times.
Yeah, dark times. Give up that Jordan, get the loan, whatever. Whereas if you're dealing with in an NFT situation, if there's some Jordan expert who understands that what you have is valuable across the country, now you can use that NFT as collateral, get liquidity, in theory, much faster. And I think the concept of that is very interesting. They're working with Arcade. I've had Gabe Frank, the Arcade CEO, on the podcast before. So if you want to learn more about them, check out that interview. It's really interesting. He comes from a family of pawnbrokers, actually. Like his father ran pawn shops in Texas for like decades. So that's interesting. But I have some questions. I want to get your reaction, and then I'll go into my questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a fantastic idea. I think it's more of a signal to the market of what's coming versus like that people are really going to use it. I think it's more of like a super beta version because, as we said, I think the number is $125 that you can take out in terms of loans.
Okay, at like a 20% APY also, so it's like high interest.
So it's I think it's more of a test. I think again, G-Money is someone who's very thoughtful on the regulatory side, so that this will be done to a T, trying to make sure that consumers are actually comfortable if they do want to play around with this. I think to you and I, $125 doesn't mean that much, but when you look at people in developing countries or what the possibilities can be, I think it becomes really, really impactful.
So here's my question.
Tell me. Ask away.
So how Arcade works, right, is you have an ape, you want liquidity,
Yeah.
you put the ape in as collateral, and you get your loan and you pay your interest rates, and if you default, they get your ape. And that works because the person on the other side wants the ape, has the ape, can sell the ape. It does sort of end up functioning like a put option on the ape, because if you think the price of the ape is going to go down and you get a loan off the back of it, you don't mind defaulting because you can buy a floor ape for cheaper. So that's interesting dynamics. But the ape itself, the digital asset itself, is the asset that you want. In this case, if the asset that is valuable is not the NFT itself, but the Jordan shoe, and so, but what I'm putting up as collateral is a digital representation of that shoe. If I default, the person gets that NFT, which if the NFT itself is valuable, okay, great, this makes sense. But if the real asset is the shoe.
Yeah, I think this works more for what's coming than, like, it doesn't necessarily work for a model with Jordans or a Birkin bag. It works more for a kind of new generation of products where it's only valuable if you have both. And so I think it's setting up for what's to come versus what is now.
Exists.
That's I think there's interesting kind of like markets that can develop around, StockX doing kind of trading on different shoes, and you put them in vaults, and then you kind of trade the NFTs and make calls on what's popular or what's going to work in a sneaker market. But it's hard. I think no one has also really discovered and figured out the digital to physical.
Right. The other potential here is the legal route, which it sort of kills the point because you're talking about jurisdictions all over the world, and that's the whole point is to create mass liquidity. But like there is a world where you have a smart contract that is you have sort of legal code within there, and Remaster is working on this in a couple of contexts where how do you really embed legal language and sort of like legal codification stuff within a smart contract. And so if the NFT has some of that says like, the owner of this NFT is the entitled owner to this pair of shoes.
Exactly.
In theory, you could try to create sort of an enforcement mechanism that way. Again, I think it's really hard.
And that changes the entire like jurisdictional system.
I mean, it's again, if you're trying to sell this to somebody in France and you're in the United States, I mean, it's sort of hard. Like, how do you enforce this stuff?
But I think also what that does is these types of kind of offerings allow new ways of thinking and allows new ways for like consumers to actually understand the governmental system in which they're operating within, and it creates a lot of like new conversations, and so like I think it's really interesting that products like this, like actually the consumer process can then change the way that you're actually understanding your world and the country that you're living in. So that's really powerful as well, I think.
I'm excited. They're also doing 90cc had an activation here.
Yes.
You get sweatshirts that had like POAPs for you to distribute if you own the sweatshirt.
Which I have.
You do. You got it.
I mean, so what I have, so yesterday at the boys club party, there was a guy wearing the 90cc shirt, and I was like, oh, how did the process go? Now, it was $600 to buy the shirt. Now, there's many $600 t-shirts you can buy. I don't think that's that crazy at the end of the day.
Luxury fashion.
Yeah, or like crazy vintage shirts, whatever it is, like, $600 shirts, okay, sure.
I've never bought a $600 shirt.
I can't say I haven't. You know what I mean? But what I'll say is, when you also look at G Money and how he dresses and his aesthetics, I'm like, yeah, he's up to buying $600 shirts. So like, he's going to produce that. That makes sense, I think, from like a leadership perspective and
sell what you know.
Sell what you buy. and when you're setting the precedent of Saint Laurent or Dior or Balenciaga shirt with the branding, like you're expecting to kind of pay that much. Yeah. But what is the most interesting, I think, from the actual activation is that you can go up to someone and get their POAP. And so doing that yesterday, it's quite like an intimate experience. Like you're like, whoa, like it's like a touch, it's like a tactile, and it's really merging the digital and physical in a really unique way. And it actually then empowers the wearer in a way that we haven't necessarily seen, because it's a genuine like networking tool in that you're then digitally connected through a physical interaction.
So like you go up to the person has their sweatshirt, they've got the NFC tag, you tag their NFC tag.
On the hip.
You tap their NFC tag with your phone.
Yeah.
And then you get their POAP.
Yes.
That's interesting.
And so that is new. And then, through kind of wearing the shirt, you're able, you can create kind of off of that. It's kind of, I think, from the PFP, okay, you can create a brand around your ape or your punk. It's a way that you're able to kind of expand that, and he's introduced an interesting way to do that through very kind of obviously branded shirts, and immediately what the experience can be and how you can engage with that person when you see them. So it's a different way, I think, to create social networks.
It's a no-brainer to me from a like extension of fan experiences perspective, which I know is
it's
what he's looking at. It's what IYK is looking at. It's why it makes so much sense in like a concert setting where you go to a concert and you buy a piece of merch and then you get something exclusive. That you can tap as a part of that merch you bought at that particular show, and I think it's
with
really
other
cool.
fans, particularly if it's a shared experience, and then you're able to immediately connect digitally. If you're all buying the same concert T-shirt, you're all at the same concert, and then you're connecting with each other and sharing that. So I think with a lot of this stuff too, it's not necessarily how you're interacting with the end product. It's creating a way for all the fans of that product to interact differently, and create new experiences for them together. So it's kind of double layered in that way.
COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses that need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage its treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the highly secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasury management to expressive, flexible, and multi-chain treasury features, such as global user management, global contacts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire entire organization, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Messari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. You have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless. We're all bullish on NFTs, but gaining exposure to NFTs as a whole is difficult. How are you supposed to gain broad, generic exposure to an industry that's designed to be unique and non-fungible? CRYPTEX has the answer. CRYPTEX Finance produces synthetic tokens that lets you get exposure to areas of crypto that you otherwise couldn't. Their first product, TCAP, provides broad exposure to the total crypto market cap of all crypto assets. And their second product, JPEGZ, gives you the ability to get exposure to the entire NFT market. It's the first real NFT index token, so you don't have to go hunting for rares or finding under the radar opportunities. You just need to own some JPEGs, because JPEGZ tracks all NFT collections with real-time exposure. This is a first-of-a-kind product from CRYPTEX, who has worked in close collaboration with Chainlink for months to ensure accurate price feeds for true exposure. Live minting and trading of JPEGs will open at the end of Q4, so make sure you stay up to date with CRYPTEX Finance by joining their Discord, Telegram, or following them on Twitter.
Last topic, because this was something I actually recorded about last week for the recap episode, and then none of my audio was captured, and it was Thanksgiving week, and so I was at my in-laws. I didn't have any of my recording equipment. I couldn't re-record it. Devastating loss of a recap episode. But one of the things I talked about, it was actually a solo too, which I never do.
It's
harder,
yeah.
and I did all this time, and I did it,
Yeah.
and nobody got to hear it. But one of the projects I talked about was C0ckPunch, which it's hard to say.
Gorgeous name. Thank you for that. I won't be saying it. Happy you did. Yeah. Happy you did.
Oh my gosh, I'm dying. Yeah, I laugh every time I say it, which I guess is probably the point. It's Tim Ferriss's new NFT project. I recorded before Tim went on Bankless recently. I haven't listened to that episode yet. I recorded this before he had gone on, but he had done some episodes with Kevin Rose. I hear you don't know much about this project, so I'm going to give you the rundown.
I'm ready for it.
Okay. So I'll say this, my first impression was the name, oh my God, the broiest bros in Broville.
I was going to say, it's certainly for an audience that I don't think is us.
Correct. But you know what's interesting about it? The reason it does do that thing where you're the markets, actually I would love your thoughts on this. I feel like the markets have very much been driven by gamer culture. And so a lot of successful projects have done well on the back of gamer bros
absolutely
liking it and resonating with it. And so I was all right, from that standpoint, I think Tim does kind of natively, as does Kevin, appeal to that audience. And kind of naturally gravitates towards things that probably will also appeal to them. So I don't know. It's obviously kind of a funny name.
Yeah, because his podcast is so kind of vast.
Yeah, it is. I love his podcast.
And it's so thoughtful.
Yeah, it's great.
And so I'm he's thought this out. This is a clear choice that he's making.
Oh, yeah.
There's a roadmap that we're not privy to that may make this make more sense. But
I just think he thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
Tim Ferriss, very thoughtful. I love his podcast.
Yeah, me too.
I say bro, and I don't mean it derogatorily. He's definitely a bro. You know what I mean?
You just mean it descriptively.
I mean it it accurately.
Yeah,
He likes tech gadgets.
Yeah.
He's been podcasting for a lot of years, so you can go back to early he's a bro.
Nothing more tech bro than an early podcast.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. And I think he thinks C0ckPunch is hilarious. Now, okay, so my thing, my initial reaction, I was all right, there's a charity component to this. The entire primary mint is going to a charity. I was it's probably a prostate cancer thing.
Yes.
And then the C0ckPunch makes sense. Nope, it's not. It's psychedelic research, which again, broish bros Broville.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But the truth is, that's the surface level. Deeper, both on the project, also on the charity side. There's more to this. It's research into psychedelics as treatments for PTSD, for obsessive disorders, OCD, anorexia. There's a lot of sort of mental health disorders that or there's research into how they can be treated through microdosing.
He's been a leader talking about that and experimenting with psychedelic therapy.
So great, it's going to a good cause. Obviously, secondary sales, they haven't said that, so I think that probably is where he makes his money. Royalties in better shape. Yeah, I know, right? X2Y2, not to totally derail what we're talking about, but X2Y2 came out and said they're going to enforce royalties after OpenSea made their move.
Yep.
Blur has said that too. So the tide is actually totally shifting back in favor of royalties, and there's now business incentives to enforce royalties, which I think is exciting. So there may be money here yet for Tim in secondary sales. To your point, not that he needs it, but still.
Yeah.
And then on the deeper level, I think things that folks may not realize, because I certainly didn't, is that Tim actually has a whole history with creating art as an artist. He apparently in college was did graphic design work for folks. Like he has this whole artistic side. And so this is exciting for him from like a creative perspective, working with sort of artists, doing some of the art. I think the artists have cleaned it up. He actually has designed every book cover for all of his books apparently. And then would work with like designers to kind of clean it up. So he has that side of him already, which is interesting. And he's like fully world building for this. And he's like, I'm spending so much time. This is such an amazing kind of creative outlet for me. I'm spending all this time. There's like 7 clans. Let me see. I have notes here again. I was talking about this last week. 8 primary clans that he's already built out a ton of details for. So like different religions, different cultures, different et cetera, and he's hired a voice actor. He's been writing these like stories. He's hired a voice actor, at least one, he said there may be more, who are recording podcasts out of these stories. So he's going to do this from a podcast perspective. So like season 1, the first set of stories around these 8 clans, voice actors on board to turn it into like a podcast season 1, and then maybe evolve from there. So he's definitely putting time in this. In the interview I listened to that he did with Kevin Rose, he was definitely trying to be very careful about like almost this vibe, which I respected, of like, I do very well in life. I don't need to be bullied by the internet. Like the second this stops being fulfilling for me, he's like, I'm doing this because I actually find it really fulfilling. I haven't been this excited about a creative project since a book I did 7 years ago. Like, but if this is just like a point of misery and I'm just getting like hell for it all the time, like I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do. But like I don't need to keep doing this. Yeah. So there was that element, but there was also the element of like, but with that said, like I am treating this really seriously. I absolutely love doing this. I want to build out these worlds. I already have a bunch of story written, and I have other surprises that I don't want to say because I don't want to overpromise, underdeliver kind of a thing. So I definitely don't think this is some celebrity cash grab.
No, I agree. Absolutely not.
And I actually think there's like, Tim Ferris has a proven track record. Again, I think he appeals to the very audience that tends to trade and pump prices of NFTs. So like my takeaway last week, again, I want to listen to his interview with Bankless, was like, this could be a buy.
Yeah, you know what? We know he's an executor.
Totally.
And we know that he puts things out. Like, as a podcast host, you have to produce all the time to make it successful. And consistency is so important.
Yep.
A thing that I would like to pick up with what you said, the kind of, I guess this is very meta since we're on a podcast, but the podcast market and the kind of voice market around crypto communities and like NFT kind of storytelling and world building is so untapped. So the fact that he's doing that, and that's his bread and butter, makes so much sense. And Jenkins the Valet just released yesterday or the day before that they're doing a whole podcast series about their storytelling. So I think that needs to be expanded, and the fact that he's doing that, I'm sure he'll be a leader and he'll really push the limits on that. And I think that's a really, really big space because crypto, the pulse is in podcasts a lot of times. So
it's Twitter Spaces and podcasts
and tweets in general.
Yeah.
And, so why wouldn't someone do it that way? So I really like that he's doing that. My question would be, I wonder if he's considering this an onboarding mechanism. Excuse the term onboarding. I know I roll to that, but what percentage of his listeners that are not interested will actually convert? I'm not sure how this actually relates to his previous announcement of Project 555, where what he did is, he announced initially his NFT project, and he said, if you want to get whitelists for this, you need to sign up for our newsletter, and that's where you're going to get the exclusive link to kind of go through the token gating process to be able to do it. What's very interesting about that is then using crypto folks actually to get into his podcast kind of like tech world, his, Tim Ferris world. So kind of opposite, I think, as most people are doing, where they're trying to get kind of people in their traditional kind of brand building world into the crypto world. And he did the other way.
I don't know.
I mean, it's interesting to me that he made people sign up for his newsletter.
Sure. I think there are a lot of people, I think a lot of projects or, who come from mainstream world are actually just trying to kind of feast on
the crypto
people. And
you're right.
Certainly at the corporate level, they're not putting it out on their Twitter. They're not actually like talking to their audiences particularly. They're really only talking to the NFT audience. And I think you see that play out by them using terms like NFT, which are obviously going to turn off some of their audiences. That's at the corporate level. Yeah. I think Tim, on this question of onboarding broadly, he shared the interview he and Kevin did together. They do the random show together, he and Kevin Rose. And so so it was sort of like a random show episode that he put on his podcast feed, which goes to Lord only knows how many
millions
and probably millions of people. And then he's talking about it in his newsletter. So I do think I agree. Like he probably got a bunch of people from the NFT world signed up to his newsletter.
Easier conversion perhaps than a Starbucks or, because his brand
audience
is so
already
seamless.
so natively tech focused.
And so I bet it was one of the most successful converts that there's been.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know?
So it'll be interesting. I don't know how, I don't think he's onboarding people into the NFT space the way like a Gary Vee did, who was so all in and so like powerfully like trying to educate folks about this. Different communicator. Yeah. But I do think he's opening up millions of people to what he's doing, which is a cool thing. On that note, Blake, time to go enjoy our time in Miami. The
torrential downpour of Miami. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I would love for you to come back.
I can't wait.
Check out Context. Views on crypto and culture.
Updates coming soon.
Updates coming soon. Enjoy the weekend.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.